Welded. By Tom Piccirilli and T.M. Wright. It's a familiar story. Kid and girl fall in love. Homicidal maniac kidnaps and butchers girl over a 3-day period in an isolated cabin on the beach. Kid is left for dead at the shore with a partially crushed skull. Parents fail to identify girl's remains. Kid winds up with a couple of metal plates welded in his skull. Kid awakens from coma and has to learn to walk again, feed himself again, rediscover spatial geometry, etc. Kid is called down to the morgue. Kid identifies girl's bits based on a shred of a rose tattoo on a scrap of her left buttock. The parents, of course, didn't know. 7 months after her death, girl is at last buried. Memorial service has 5,000 mourners and is blitzed by the media. Helicopters, reporters crawl over Kid. Kid spends 12 weeks under psychiatric care for consistent outbursts of rage and violence. He does harm to himself. He does harm to others. Shrinks claim explosions of frenzy and phantom auditory and visual phenomena are the result of lasting minor brain damage. He sees things and hears things. Cops cut him a break and don't stuff him in prison for bar brawls, for beating up pushy journalists, for drunk and disorderly. Maniac racks up an additional 9 kills before the feds shut him down. Maniac, like all the best murderers, terrorists, and assassins, has 3 names: Ricky Benjamin Price. Kid, like all the best heroes, has no name. Ricky likes writing letters. He writes his congressman, his president, the Associated Press, the New York Times, the ACLU, the pretty newscaster on Channel 4, the families of his victims, and he writes the kid. Nobody responds, except for the kid. Nobody visits, except for the kid. The kid's there now, letting Ricky's soft and seductive voice work its magic on his nerves. He sits on a chair outside the cell while Ricky lies on his bunk, his arm thrown over his face, motionless except for his lips. The voice is like cold cream on sunburn. You take your kindnesses where you can, and Ricky's voice is just that, a kindness, a mercy. The shrinks, the cops, the protesters pro and con capital punishment screaming outside, they all grate and fray and scrape. The kid can't stand their gruffness, their know-it-all attitudes, their noise, their touch. Everything they do or say drives him up a fucking wall. He hates everybody. The kid's been visiting the prison for 5 years. Ricky's been on death row nearly the whole time. His execution's set for tomorrow at 9 p.m. You'd think it would be midnight, but no. 9 p.m., who knows the reasoning behind it? Ricky seems to be looking forward to his impending death. The kid isn't so sure how he feels about it. The girl's parents are out there right now, grouped up with the yahoos and rednecks drinking beer and promising to keep their lights off so there's enough juice to fry Ricky good. Of course, Ricky's getting the hot shot, and the kid's got a front row seat. Ricky wanted a firing squad. The kid thought that was still allowable in this state, but apparently not. They denied him. The kid knows what it's like to go to sleep almost forever, lying there paralyzed, struggling for breath, while the waves roll over your knees and try to drag you under and away. They've got a lot in common now, him and the guy who almost killed him. Ricky whispers on. What he says doesn't really matter. Most of it is a play-by-play rundown of exactly what he did, and when, and to whom, and how they tried to run, or scream, or fight back. The girl was brave and very strong. She didn't go easy. Ricky points this out over and over. The girl scratched and bit and struggled. She did better than any of the others. The kid feels the same stirring of love and pride he's felt for her for years. His skull aches and thrums and rattles full of locusts. He gets migraines that make the world tilt and send him into free fall. Ricky is used to the kid clenching his temples and crying out by now, and he calls for the bulls so somebody can drag the kid's ass off to the infirmary. Aspirin are considered contraband, but Ricky's got a couple and offers them to the kid, who waves them off. The bulls come. The setup is sort of funny. You can't mingle with the cons, so the infirmary is kind of a secondary ward set off from the primary one, with a lot of reinforced glass between the two. But you're right here, and the cons are right there. The kid's vision is unfocused, he's seeing 2, 3, 4 of everything, looking beyond dimensions into parallel universes, the edges red and black and throbbing. The prison docs are aware of his condition. They treat him as a psych patient. They juice him with powerful sedatives, the stuff they give to the psycho killers who stabbed their mothers 95 times. The cons stare at him through the glass. He stares back. He's in here with a little boy who skinned his knee while visiting his father, who still has 9 years to go on a 15-year stretch. The mother of the boy stares off into a dream, seeing herself in another life, another time, with fulfilled expectations, no guilt, no humiliation. The boy sniffles. The mother gnaws her lip. A pregnant woman who started having false contractions is moaning in the corner. She's rattling in Spanish about how she wants to get the hell out of here so her child isn't born behind bars. The kid hopes they move her out soon too. The doc comes over and touches the kid's head. His brain burns and sings. The metal feels white hot. The doc pulls his fingers back quickly as the kid groans in agony. The doc hands him 2 horse pill pain meds and writes on a chart. The doc asks boring questions, not like Ricky. The doc asks about pain levels, about the consistency of stool, about sleeping habits, drug use, alcohol consumption, sexual function. The doc asks why the kid keeps coming back week after week. The doc asks about nightmares, about the violent outbursts, about anger management, psychosis. Ricky's back on death row, but his voice is still whispering under the kid's welded metal plates. The voice is malleable, mellifluous, slick, oily, like aloe. The girl is screaming under there too, but Ricky shushes her, calms her, quiets her, the way he did in real life, or thought he did, before she worked a screw free from her cot and stabbed him in the guts with it. Ricky nearly croaked from peritonitis. The girl wishes that he would have. The girl stares at the cons too. One Aryan with the face of Adolf covering his entire chest has got his tongue unfurled. He's bandaged with 3 seeping shiv wounds. He makes kissy faces at the kid, he makes kissy faces at the pregnant woman, he makes kissy faces at the little boy, and the girl says, "Before you go, you ought to kill him." Maybe she's right. Maybe it's time for another brutal surge of rage. The kid isn't afraid of his capacity for ferocity anymore. It feels good to cut loose. It feels righteous. And how are you going to get in trouble kicking the ass of a guy who has Hitler's face on his chest? The only real problem is getting through the glass, getting to the other side of the glass. Funny though, the girls never come right out and ask the kid to kill Ricky. She doesn't seem to hold too firm a grudge against Ricky, despite the horrors and the slicing and the chewing and the rest of it. The feds, even with their top forensic scientists working the evidence, only got about half the story right in the end. The girl has explained to the kid in excruciating detail exactly what happened to her and the others. The kid stands and knocks gently on the glass, then shoots the Nazi the finger. The Aryan sneers, reaches under the mattress, and holds up a little triangular piece of glass with a taped handle. No wonder he got shanked, the girl says in his brain, pressed to the metal, sweating, beautiful as always. That shit couldn't protect anybody. The kid searches for a way past the glass. The doc is in his office area, chatting with a nurse, laughing, the doc reaching out to touch the nurse first on the shoulder, then the elbow, then the hip. The doc is oblivious to everyone in here. The doc is oblivious to the cons, to Adolf, to Ricky's voice still humming, almost cooing, making the kid's hands feel electrical, like there's lightning in his fingers, and there is. The door is locked, but the girl was observant and picked up on the keypad code. The kid doesn't even have to press the numbers, he just touches the pad and the lock pops and the door opens an inch. He slips inside. Another door, another keypad, another code, another time that he doesn't have to do anything but let his fingers touch the pad. The other door pops. The Aryan is watching him enter. Adolf is watching him enter. The girl says, use his own shiv. Gut him. The Aryan tries to climb out of bed. There are other cons in the infirmary, some of them hurt bad, some just faking and keeping an eye out, like they're planning a crash out. One opens his mouth and says, hey, to the kid, and the kid spins and brings his elbow across and down into the con's collarbone. The snap is so loud they hear it in hell. The girl tells him so. The con hits the floor like a bag of wet sin. The kid continues on. The girl talks on. Ricky whispers on. The Aryan starts to mule. Adolf starts to give a speech, his weird swipe of hair flopping across his forehead. The Aryan climbs out of the bed and holds his little piece of glass up in a defensive pose, jabbing at the air. He holds the weapon all wrong. Ricky knows the right way. He murmurs how you hold the blade out flat, low, so you can stab or slash or slice, forward or backhand. The Aryan hobbles forward and the kid leans in, blocks the shard of glass coming in toward his kidneys. These guys, they think the secret is to puncture the kidneys, forgetting it takes weeks to kill a guy that way, snaps his fist against the Nazi's wrist, slaps the blade from it, and then goes to work. Adolf is smiling now, getting a kick out of all this. His speech has moved on to the Jews, to destroying the Allies, to purifying the nation, and 100,000 Germans are Sieg Heiling in the square, going fucking crazy. The girl points up. American planes are flying overhead. Who the fuck knows what year it is? It doesn't matter. Ricky says it's 1941. The girl says it's closer to 43. The kid has no idea and doesn't care. He jabs the Aryan's gut, especially the area where he'd been stabbed before. After 3 or 4 hard shots, his fists are covered with blood. It's a fine feeling. Ricky loves it. The kid doesn't mind it. Everyone loves to talk about the smell of blood, but it has none, not at first. Blood has to oxidize first, and then it grows copper-colored, dries into a powder like rust, and then it has that acrid scent the morbid poets sing about. The girl bled a lot. She was kept around dying by inches for a long time. Ricky used to talk to her endlessly. He did things to her that still make the kid tighten his arms across his belly. The girl doesn't care anymore. Why should she? She's dead. So's the Aryan. The kid went too far, or maybe it was the girl, or Ricky, or Adolf, or all of them. In any case, there he is on the floor, his ribs shattered into splintered knives that have torn his organs to pieces. There's a deep blue tinge to his flesh beneath the ink. It looks like his lungs are punctured. It looks like his heart's impaled. The other cons watch. The other cons take notice. The other cons do not fuck with the kid. The pregnant woman on the other side of the glass is staring wide-eyed. So is the little boy. The little boy's mother is still absorbed in her daydreams. Her eyes are full of handsome bankers with huge swimming pools who give her diamond necklaces. The doc is feeling up the nurse. The nurse is being felt up. The girl's parents are chanting along with the other capital punishment fiends, trying to drown out the protesters who are singing some hymns that strike sparks off the metal in the kid's skull. All of it is starting to get to be too much. He backs away from the corpse and bumps into the footboard of another bed, pulls off the sheet covering the legs of another con, some guy faking a fever so he get out of punching license plates or chain gang roadwork or whatever it is they do here. Kid wipes his hands as clean as he can on the sheet and drops it. Ricky hums along with the protesters. He was raised in a very religious household by deeply believing parents. He doesn't blame his upbringing for the way he turned out. His parents were nice, good people. It wasn't their fault. Neither was it his pastors or the congregations or his neighbors. He doesn't hold God accountable. He doesn't hold himself accountable either. He takes one of those views that say you are what you are what you are meant to be, what you are fated to be. The girl says it's an excuse. Nobody was meant to be what Ricky is. Ricky counters with the fact that there are more like him every day. Maybe it's evolution. Maybe it's the natural order. Time to move. The kid slips back through the door. The doc is going full blast on the nurse now, finger fucking her right there, practically out in the open. She's rubbing him through his trousers. Ricky's getting a little turned on, but not as turned on as he was when killing the girl or helping the kid kill the Aryan. The kid makes it back to the waiting room, and the pregnant woman sees the dried streaks of blood on his hands and knows in her pregnant heart, what is pregnant inside of him. She crosses herself. The gesture somehow soothes the kid a little, calms him, even while the girl snorts and scoffs in disgust. She hears her parents too. She hates them. She hates all the living now, but that's not her fault. All the dead hate the living. It's just the way it is, just like Ricky is the way he is, just like the kid is welded between them and to them. The kid washes his hands in one of those old-fashioned shitty drinking fountains, the water arching about a half-inch. The boy has forgotten about his skin knee now. The pregnant woman isn't about to give birth. The mother of the boy takes him by the elbow and calls for a guard. The guard shows and everyone moves off together. They're escorted down the corridors and out the front door, down the long sidewalk, past the main gates and the gatherers. The kid is recognized at once. There's an even louder buzz. People grab at him. They question him. The girl's parents smile at him. He smiles back. The girl doesn't. She's still slightly offended her parents couldn't ID her body, but the kid doesn't blame them for that, not at all. "How are you?" her mother asks him. He should answer fine. That's the only answer anybody really wants or expects. He should say fine. He should embrace them and share in their sorrow. He should let one of them or both of them pat his back and rub his shoulders. And stroke the back of his head. It's what they did the last time he saw them. It made him feel better, a little, for a second. It took away a little of the lightning pain. Reporters call him by name. Reporters jump in his face. Reporters jam microphones against his mouth, they jab at him with cameras. The protesters want him to sing with them. The yahoos want him to seethe and spit venom. The kid walks past them all. Some follow. He doesn't run. He doesn't speak. He finds his car. He gets in and drives home slowly, Ricky's voice dulling the intense traffic noise. The girl is sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window. She's got something to say about almost everything. The kid doesn't remember her being so chatty, but death is apparently very boring. He isn't looking forward to his own. They cross a toll bridge and she says she misses the toll booth guys who used to work there. Now you drive by and you catch a bill in the mail a couple of weeks later. She is nostalgic for the things that have changed since she's died. TV shows that have gone off the air, songs played by bands that are no longer together. She asks him about things he doesn't give a shit about. "Are you listening to me?" she squawks. He is and he isn't. He's really thinking about the ocean. He misses it. He hasn't gone swimming since Ricky caved his head in. Hasn't walked in the shallows, hasn't even dipped his feet in off a dock. He still remembers lying on the shore with the waves pushing him up into the sand and then pulling him out again while the girl screamed and Ricky chased her down. He remembers Ricky talking then too, endlessly talking, keeping up a steady stream of chatter that didn't make any sense, at first, not until it got in deep and festered and could be examined at length. Ricky talking about his nightmares, his fears, his honest hopes, his games, his skills, his twists, his kinks. Explaining what he was going to do, and when, and how it would go down, and why it had to happen like that to one girl or another. He killed as many guys as he did girls, but nobody focuses on them because they usually went quick. He brained most of them when stealing the girls. He left them dead in their beds, in the parks, at the beaches, at the drive-ins. Ricky was at the drive-in when they caught him, sitting there watching the end credits roll, with popcorn in his teeth. The kid was the only one to survive. He doesn't know why. No one does, not even the dead. People made a lot of jokes about his hard head, but they should try it now. If anybody ever hit him with a rock in the back of the skull again, the stone would crumble into dust. Ricky once asked him if he was bulletproof now. Some asshole comes up behind him with a .22, a .32, maybe even a .38, would it get through or would the bullet shatter the way it sometimes did off bone? The kid didn't know the answer. Ricky suggested he ask the doctors. He should know these things. The girl harbors deep resentments. For Ricky and the kid, and her living friends, her sisters, her dog. She remembers the way Ricky pulled her away down along the beach, the kid's body lying there in the sand, not even struggling, not even fighting to get up. Not climbing to his knees, not getting to his feet, not screaming, not coming to save her. The kid half in the water like he was just body surfing. The kid thinks she's being unreasonable as hell, but she counters that it's her right to be irrational. She's dead. You can't argue with logic like that. He lets her try to pry up the plates and worm guilt into his brain. It doesn't really matter. He's already as guilty as he can possibly be. She knows this, but she can't help herself. She rages still. She cries still. She shrieks still, the way she did when she was Ricky's prisoner and he brought out the tools that first time. At the moment she thought she was all alone, but afterward she learned that many people heard her anguish. They all mistook it for something else. Cats fighting. Babies crying. Dogs prowling. The neighbor's TV too loud. Her screams echoed on the wind for miles and miles, up canyons, down the beaches, over distant fields. When the kid gets back to his place, a new letter from Ricky is waiting for him. Ricky will never run out of things to say. The letter goes on, page after page, and Ricky, who often tells the same stories over and over, still finds a way to make his missives interesting, exceedingly readable. Ricky's voice reads Ricky's letter aloud in the kid's mind. He finishes the letter and puts it with the others in the box in his closet. It's the fourth box he's filled. The other three are sealed away in the crawl space. The girl hisses at him, "Why do you keep that insanity so close at hand? Do you want to be crazy? Is that it? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not. He hasn't figured it out yet. Maybe it's his nature, his fate. He doesn't expect to ever figure it out. He only expects that the letter writing will end with Ricky's hot shot. He knows Ricky's voice is with him forever. It's a familiar story. The kid lies on the couch and the girl crawls over him the way she did when she was alive. She liked being on top. She liked being close as she could get, and would tell him to hold her tight, tighter, tighter than that, crush the breath from her lungs. He would grip her tightly and she'd yawp and go, "Not that hard. That hurts." He'd ease up. They'd watch the news together. She'd comment on the ugliness of the world. He would watch quietly. She would ask him over and over again, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" He would stare at her and have no answer. He never had an answer to any of her questions, and still doesn't. "What's wrong?" she asks. He could respond at length. She has time. She has nothing but time. He watches the news and sees her parents out in front of the prison and listens to the warden give a canned statement, and listens to the leader of the protesters discussing God and forgiveness, and he listens to the yahoos yahooing. He listens to a couple of cats fighting, a baby crying, and wonders if someone like Ricky has grabbed someone like the girl and someone like the kid is lying with his skull in fragments at a lakeside or on a beach or at the drive-in. He wonders if he should investigate. He gets to his feet. He starts for the door. She asks, "Where are you going?" Ricky's voice tells him it's nothing, it's nothing. It's nothing to worry about. And it isn't. He opens the door and sees the cats fighting near the trash cans where the apartment manager has left them. He shuts the door, he sits again, she sits on his lap, he flips the station, he holds on to her tightly, he looks at the tattoo on her ass. He presses the side of his face to her back. She's in excellent shape, every muscle and tendon hard and well defined in her flesh that is only memory. Sleep comes the way it has come since the attack. It comes like a rock to the head. It comes like a voice under the metal welded to the skull. It comes like murder. You can't prepare for it. You can't get comfortable first. You can't make room for it in your life. It descends and owns you. The kid wakes up and it's morning. Reporters are at the door, calling his name. He goes to the window and pulls the curtains aside. The group is suddenly lively, active, like a gathering of pigeons that have spotted a cat. They call to him. They wave. They're like a mob of Japanese tourists. They aim cameras at the window. The prettiest journalists preen. They try to draw him out with their moist lips, their heated gazes, the arcs of their breasts and asses. The kid knows he is only news because he is alive. The girl is there with some of the other girls, girls just like her, that Ricky tortured and killed. Some of the boys have come along too, lost, mostly forgotten, unwanted, uninteresting. They all look the same as the kid did 5 years ago. They're young, soft, without much character to their faces. No worry lines, no gray, cheeks buffed to a healthy, rosy glow, a golden hue, bursting with life and stupidity. They fill the room, smiling, laughing, like this is a frat house and they're preparing for a kegger. The dead boys and dead girls reminisce. The kid wonders if any of them have any burning messages they want to pass on to friends or family. Or for the world to know before Ricky finally goes down. He turns and faces them, but they're dancing now. They're playing a song that was popular a few years back. The girl moves up behind him, gets close, puts her lips to the back of his neck, reaches around him and grinds slowly. Ricky has things to say about dancing. Ricky has things to say about everything. She reaches down. She tries to rouse the kid. The others are doing their thing. The song plays on and on. He wants to smash the CD player, the MP3 player, the iPod, but he doesn't own any of that. They've brought the music with them from the darkness, from the past, from the place where you go when you do not go all the way away. The pretty reporters bend their knees a little and sway. The girl becomes more grabby. She's not holding on to the kid so much as she's holding on to life. Whatever life she can still get her hands on. The others moan. The others say what they need to say. They keep trying to make their peace but can't quite do it. There's no peace left to be made. They're angry that the kid is friendly with Ricky at all. They're angry he made it. They hound him the way they've hounded him for years. They cluster. They breathe his air. They try to peel up the metal plates and lie down under them, inside his blood and bone. They want him to give voice. They're keenly aware of the reporters out front. They have messages for their parents. They have messages for Ricky. The reporters are getting a little more aggressive now. They press the doorbell. They knock. They call the kid's name. They peer in the windows. They shout out large amounts of money. 20,000 for an interview, one of the dead boys says. It's an impressive number, even after you've been croaked. It only serves to infuriate the dead boys and girls. If they had lived, they would have taken the money. If they had lived, they would be eager to tell their stories. If they had lived, and it was the kid's ghost that was annoying them, they would listen, they would help him however they could, they would pay more attention. You do like having us around, don't you? The girl asks. The answer is no, but he can't tell them that, especially since they're already inside him, in his marrow, in the marrow of his mind. They're as welded to him as the plates to his skull, as Ricky. He wants them gone, but he doesn't know what he would do without them. The thought of losing Ricky fills him with a sense of dread he doesn't understand on any level. He doesn't know what the hell he's going to do when Ricky dies. He fears Ricky's voice will leave with his life, and the kid will be left with nothing but these other dead. 30,000, the dead boy says, repeating a number hurled from outside. What would you do with 30,000 bucks? The kid thinks of what he might have said 6 or 7 years ago to that kind of offer. He would have done what with the cash? Sailed around the world. Visited exotic locales. Bought a cabin on the beach. He'd always wanted to travel, used to dream about it, plot it, graph it, chart it, map it with the girl. Indochina, Burma, Egypt, Brazil, Pago Pago. There's still time, he imagines, except there isn't, and there never was. He's going crazy again, a dead girl, not his dead girl, says. He can't handle the dreams and hopes he once found refuge in. They cause nothing but pain now. The metal plates are heating up as if someone is standing there with a blowtorch, burning him. He twists and writhes on the couch, the music still playing. The kid falls to the floor, manages to get to his knees, his feet, crosses the room, opens the front door. He's ready to scream at the mob to leave him alone. Except only the prettiest of the pretty journalists is standing there now. Time has passed. He checks his watch. It's late. It's getting late. Ricky's due to take his shot soon. The kid has to move if he's going to get to the prison in time. The girl says, she isn't so pretty. But the pretty reporter is. She's beautiful. She's lovely. She's alive. She holds herself in a way that exploits all her natural charms, all the curves and the brimming self-confidence. This is a woman who has handled herself well and overcome great odds. She's vanquished her foes and resorted to whatever tactics she needed to resort to for that moment. She carries her guilt perfectly, as if she's not carrying any guilt at all. She says another number. 50,000. Kid likes her voice. It's a mellifluous voice, but it has grit, substance, personality. He likes watching her lips. He likes the way she moves toward him, saying his name with some endearment, as if she's been waiting for him at the train station for a long time and has just spotted him. He imagines her there, on the platform, waving to him. He shuts his eyes. She's spurring his dreams again. The metal continues heating, red hot, white hot. He tries to tell her to stop. He tries to wave her away from him. He tries to find Ricky's voice in his mind to calm him, center him. The pretty reporter is close, with a mic in her hand, a cameraman appearing from nowhere, from everywhere. The cameraman says, "We're rolling." The reporter asks, concerning Ricky Benjamin Price, "Have you forgiven him for what he's done to you?" The kid wants to say that at the moment he's not as angry with Ricky as he is with her. Ricky kills dreams, she's igniting them, she's burning him. The kid has to shut her up. He lunges and presses his mouth to hers while she lets out a squeal of surprise and maybe lust. Who knows? He can't tell. It doesn't matter. He tastes her. He smells her. He breathes her in. She's alive. That matters. The cameraman goes maybe 250, a big bruiser carrying big hardware, none of that compact machinery the small guys run around with when they're after a story. Nah, he's got the serious stuff, the old school camera like a boulder on his shoulder. The bruiser catches a nice close-up of the kiss for maybe a 3 count before he goes, "Hey," the kid wants to explain to her. "You don't know what you've done. You don't know what you're doing. You need to run. You have to run. Go. Go." The girl says, she's not going to go. And somehow the pretty lady senses what he's saying to her. Maybe he's saying it aloud although he can't hear himself. He can't hear all that much over what's going on in his head. He wants the 50 large now, in cash, thinking that maybe he can pay somebody off at the prison to stay the execution. It's late, it's too late, but he has to try. The reporter slaps him. She tags him nicely. It's not exactly a slap. More of a punch, and it hurts, catches him flush under the left ear in the ganglia of nerves there. The plates clang together. His head lights up even more. The girl, his dead girl, goes, "Whoa." The dead boys and girls want to explain themselves. They're dictating laundry lists of people they want to say something to on camera. Mothers and fathers, little sisters, brothers, cousins, loved ones of every stripe. They've got advice to share, and secrets that need to be revealed. They bark, they plead, they demand. They want their turn at saying last words. Making amends, giving confessions. The reporter says, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, please. Let's just," the kid launches himself, full of Ricky's whispers. He backhands the reporter, drops her hard. It's one of Ricky's signature moves. All the dead girls gasp, remembering. The cameraman says again, "Hey," the kid slips his hands in under the camera, eases it off the guy's shoulder, helping him, doing him a favor. The guy goes to one knee at the side of the pretty reporter. He's in love with her, he's got to be in love with her. Who could work beside her, stare at her, see her every day, and not be in love with her? The cameraman asks, "Are you okay?" "What happened?" she says, a dab of blood leaking from her lower lip. "You didn't have to hit her," the girl goes. "But of course he did. Everyone knows that." They realize what else is inside with them. They know the truth. In the kid's hands the camera comes to life. The screen lights up. He sees himself in it even though the lens isn't pointed at him. His other self seems to be trying to get his attention, tell him something meaningful and necessary. He tries to figure it out but can't. He lifts the huge old camera over his head and brings it down on the sweet spot of the cameraman's skull with an enormous crunch. Glass shatters. Plastic shatters. Bone shatters. Metal shrieks. The guy's eyes bulge but stop short of popping out. The reporter screams. A few of the dead girls scream. 2 dead boys scream. It's a hell of a chorus. The kid might be screaming too. So might the other version of himself, whoever and whatever that is. Ricky laughs. It's a familiar story, there's just a little left to do. He does it quickly, efficiently, the way Ricky used to when he was pressed for time. He cleans up. He stashes and dashes. He kills and chills. He checks for nosy neighbors. He hops in his car and floors it to the prison. Crowd control is non-existent. Everybody's got a cause to preserve and Ricky's at the heart of it all. The girl's parents have been out here for days, unnecessarily. Their faces are badly sunburned. He can see that in the prison lights. Her father's bald head shines red as the asshole of the sun. Her mother's face is full of glee, as if finally there will be justice for their daughter, at last she'll be able to rest in peace. The girl says, idiots. That's not the worst thing she's ever called them. She hated them when she was alive and she feels even more anger toward them now. More reporters are waiting in the wings. The witnesses of the execution are sequestered off to the side. They're penned in, like cattle. The protesters and protesters of the protesters all shout at one another. They don't consider this a solemn moment. They can't see the ritual of it all. The reporters shout out their questions and tug at sleeves and ask the most cloying questions. They should all be allowed to come along inside. They should all show the world what it's like for Ricky Benjamin Price to meet his doom. It's such an awful scenario that the kid groans just thinking about it. The father of one of the other dead girls stands shoulder to shoulder with the kid and sort of props him up. He's an ex-Marine. He's very into showing the world that he will not be bowed. He stares straight ahead. The bulls unlock the gates and march the witnesses in. They enter the little viewing room. They take their seats. The girl's parents sit on either side of him. Her mother murmurs and coos and tsks. Her father does what the ex-Marine did, puts a hard shoulder to him, presses him, holds him up. The girl says, he used to do that to me in church all the time. There's curtains across the viewing window. They part slowly, like the curtains rising on a stage. Act 1, Scene I, Ricky enters, in the middle of a 7-man procession. He's talking, of course he's talking. The priest is praying. The warden is giving the speech about how Ricky's been decreed to die at the appointed hour for the crimes he's committed. The bulls drag him to the X table and strap him down. There's a doctor to stick the needle in. The machine that delivers the poison is practically transparent. You can see all the instrumentality within. You can see the lethal fluids. You can see the depressors. You can see the mechanics of the thing. It is, in its own way, a parallel to what Ricky did to the girls. The way he explained everything he was going to do. The way he showed them each instrument beforehand and displayed the function of their own organs. He left their eyes for last. The mothers and fathers and other family members can't contain themselves. There are curses, prayers, vicious barking outcries of fury and pain. Some of them turn away from the window. Some of them angle in. Ricky turns his head and meets the kid's eyes. The girl says, he's ugly. He's always been ugly, but he's gotten uglier. Kid knows the reason for Ricky's ugliness. It's his fault. Greater corruptions have been piled upon Ricky's flesh and soul because of the kid's actions. Ricky is uglier today than he was yesterday because there are more murders to add to his catalog of corruption. The kid is now Dorian Gray and Ricky is the portrait. The dead boys and girls say, it's getting hot in here. And it is, inside the kid's head, where the fear and the frustration are building, and the migraine is buzzing and almost blinding him, his vision red and black, vibrating him into new universes. Sweat pours off his face and he keeps drawing the back of his hand under his chin, across his throat, the same way the girl would do to him when they were at the beach and he'd sweat this same way in the sun. But they're not talking about the room, not talking about this room. They're talking about their room, in the room between the metal and the brain. You've waited a long time for this, the girl's father says. Enjoy it. Ricky tells him to kill the man. It's easily done. Sitting here, this close, Ricky whispers how many ways he could do it. He ticks them off. 1, 2, 3, he gets to 19. There are more, but he's made his point, and the point has calmed the kid down a bit. The dead boys and girls see their folks and their siblings and cry out for them, try to reach out to them. The kid has trouble holding his hands down on his knees. The warden asks Ricky if he has anything to say. Ricky always has something to say. Ricky says and says and says. He says so much that the warden has to cut him off. The witnesses are all moaning and sobbing again. The ex-Marine is cursing. The girl's father is sort of growling deep in his throat. Her mother tries to take the kid's hand and he shakes her off, gently. To touch him like that is to destroy yourself. She tries again and receives an electric shock. The spark arcs like something out of Frankenstein's lab. It leaps. It's bright blue and buzzes. It snaps against her wrist like it wants to ride her bloodstream up to her heart. There's a small dot of black where the flesh is burned. She sucks wine through her teeth, but that's all. The girl's father glances over and sniffs. The smell of burned flesh is pungent in the small viewing room. The kid imagines this is what the viewing room for the electric chair must smell like. Ricky mouths words to the kid, specifically for him. They're words of love, which make it all the worse. The girl says, "That disgusting freak." The other dead boys and girls are offended too. Ricky never showed them any love or mercy, but that's because they didn't survive. Ricky doesn't have any use for the dying or the dead. He doesn't even have any use for himself anymore. Originally, Ricky asked that he be dissected alive on television. It was a suggestion that made everybody go fucking nuts. The human rights groups, the prison boards, the anti-capital punishment people, the pro-capital punishment people, the cannibals, the sadists, the voyeurs, the other serial killers, fucking everybody. The warden signals a go. The first plunger depresses. It's supposed to paralyze Ricky. It doesn't. The contents of the needle makes him smile even more broadly. Someone in the viewing room goes, "My God." Others echo the statement. God. My God. Oh God. The second plunger depresses. Ricky begins to laugh. He's still talking, of course, he's always talking. Kid flashes on the pregnant woman and wonders if she's in or out of labor yet. He wonders if Ricky's going to come back in some newborn. He wonders if Ricky is going to shake things up in hell. The third plunger depresses and Ricky's body bucks a little, something that's supposed to be impossible. His muscles strain. He looks like he's trying to rise. The witnesses do the gasping thing again. They moan again. The women duck their heads like they don't want Ricky noticing them. The men stare on. More sparks fly from the kid's fingers. Small arcs, but they're traveling, moving from person to person, chair to chair, forward toward the window glass. The blue light bops and weaves along, touching them all. Maybe it belongs to Ricky. Maybe it belongs to God. The ex-Marine goes, "What the fuck?" Ricky relaxes and shuts his eyes. His chin slowly lowers to the side. It's a pose of innocence, an awful caricature. He looks content, at peace. At last he shuts up. At least here he shuts up. In the kid's head he's still whispering, thankfully. Ricky croons while the doc puts a stethoscope. To Ricky's chest, then moves it to his wrist, then moves it again to his throat. The doc says Ricky's dead. The warden repeats it. The witnesses give a sigh of relief, and there's a few chuckles and sobs of happiness. The dead boys' and girls' names are invoked. Parents claim their children will rest easier now. Parents claim justice has been served. Parents claim they will sleep better now that the monster is dead. Parents don't know what the fuck they're talking about. The spark reaches the machine. The machine shits out and the depressors depress, repress, compress, unpress, drawing blood up through the needles and into the tubes that had contained the poisons. The IVs in Ricky's arm slurp his blood up. You can see it leaving his body and entering the machine. The pressure in the syringes goes haywire. The needles crack. The tubes burst. Ricky's blood jets against the window as powerfully as a cutthroat spurting arterial spray. There's something beautiful in the designs made by his painted blood. Everybody's screaming. The dead boys and girls are laughing. They find it exciting, and it is. They recognize art in the making. Their parents scramble. The bulls are going wild inside the chamber. The priest is praying. The warden is shouting. Ricky's dead body is dancing. Adolf is still Adolfing. The machine is on fire. The girl says, "You just had to ruin it for everybody." Maybe she's right. The kid must have wanted this. The only reason things like this happen is because he wants them to happen, needs for them to happen, or else Ricky does. But Ricky's finished now, except for what he's saying, except for what he's going to be saying forever now from the other side of the endless spanless darkness of infinite dimensions. "You're getting turned on," she says. She paws at him. She feels him. She likes when he gets aroused, whether it's by her touch or her memory or her death or someone else's. The blood makes her hot. She's hot there beneath the heated metal. The next migraine hits and he thrusts his hands against the sides of his head and lets out a squeal of agony that brings the whole room to a silence. They all look at him. Some stare into his eyes. Some stare at his scars. Some show mercy. Some look at him pitifully. Some hate him because he seemed to be friends with Ricky. The girl's mother smooths the back of his hair down. It feels like she's hacking at him with a hatchet. "Don't you dare murder my mother," the girl says, which surprises him, since before her death she'd been talking about how much she wanted to get away from this woman, how stupid she was, what a pain in the ass she was. Now she sounds protective, almost loving. Quite a switch after all this time. Even dead people can change. He bolts. It's allowed. It's acceptable. What else are you going to do? Some of them talk about the future, some of them talk about the past. Some of them have become friends in their shared tragedy. Some of them discuss having dinner together. Some of them want to go get a drink. The kid rushes for the door. A bull stops him like he's making a prison break. The screw's beefy arm is held out in front of him like a semaphore. The kid grabs hold of the wrist, whirls, and flips the guy over his back. The bull lets out a cry, then another. They're loud enough to get into the little room. The warden looks. The other bulls look. Ricky's corpse looks. The kid makes his way out into the hall and vomits. The bulls sniff at him like it's their problem, like they'll have to mop it up now, not some lifer who's been wielding the same mop for the last 35 years. The kid begs, "Let me out," but it takes forever. They have to escort him, they have to call ahead to get all the gates and doors open. They drag him off like he's a condemned prisoner, which he is, sort of. These pricks, these people, they all have to put pressure on, they all have to squeeze him. Outside he flails against a railing and gasps, sucking air. The crowd cheers, like it was him who'd pushed the button, pulled the lever, punched Ricky's ticket. He could've, perhaps he should've, and now he stumbles down the walk. He tries to read the signs that are being pushed his way. Passages from the Bible, literary quotes about the diminishment of mankind, pro-death penalty vitriol, remember Sally, remember Robert, remember Timothy, remember Janet. He doesn't remember any of them. Someone hands him a baby, a real baby, a live baby, a goo-goo baby girl, like he's supposed to bless the child, or maybe murder it. Who hands a complete stranger a baby? The child goes, da-da-da-da. Sing-songy, kinda with a salsa beat to it. The girl says, that yours? You that fucking kid's da-da. Were you cheating on me? He's not the kid's da-da. He hands the baby back, not to the same person, but a different stranger. There he answered his own question. Who hands a complete stranger a baby? He does. Da-da that. Somebody gives him a full pint of Jameson's. The seal's not even broken. He twists the cap off and sucks deeply from the bottle. The liquor hurts his head even more. A couple of the dead kids drink deep, a couple of them go, phooey, foo-foo, yuck, because they've never had a sip of the hard stuff. It brings things into focus for him, for a second. Which is Janet? Which is Timothy? He shoves his way through toward his car. The journalists are on him again. He wants to explain to them how dangerous it is, what they're doing, where they're standing, pushing him, touching him. He shoves his way past, makes it back to his car. He's no longer news, he should no longer be news. Ricky is dead. There really is nowhere else for him to go, nothing for him to do, but return to the beach. It's clear and obvious. He walks alone on it. The waves crash, the waves reach. He scans the sand for the rest of his skull, his mind, his life. He lost it all somewhere around here. He sees footprints and thinks of the girl running for her life. The girl thinks of him lying there dying. Ricky thinks of them both, and the others, and a surge of pleasure fills him like a shot of adrenaline directly into the heart. You've got to wonder if he can still be saved, even after the mess with the machine. Some lab assistant in the morgue stealing Ricky's body out the back and injecting it with bright green liquid, some anti-death serum. Somebody's got to be working on it, some other maniac in some other basement. A storm waits over the water. Perhaps it's been there since the day the kid died, or should have died. Perhaps it's come back to meet him, hovering here for years, waiting. The pain is so great now that the kid drops to his knees as the sand crabs rise and begin to make their way to him. Sparks flash from his fingertips, his eyes, his open mouth. The girl says, "This is it. This is the end." Maybe she's right, maybe not. The storm comes closer. Black clouds swirl overhead, vortexes, funnels, sweeping down and bringing up tens of thousands of gallons of water. It gushes around him in the wind. The dead boys are especially impressed. A couple of them liked fishing, dug boating, lived on the water. Lightning blasts down and leaves more strange patterns of bubbling molten clouded glass the size of Cadillac hoods across the beachfront all around him. Ricky calls this the divine. Ricky calls this the infernal. Ricky believes in great mythic resonance. It's been there since his early religious upbringing. When he was alive, he was always walking along the beach hoping for tidal waves and hurricanes, as well as scoping victims. Ricky wants the world to burn, the world to drown. He wants to ride high on the next arc. Well, he did, when he was alive. Ricky paws the dead. Ricky makes moves. He has no need to dismember, but he still wants to fuck, still wants to have some fun. The kid turns and turns again as the lightning crashes down. The thunder is explosive but not as loud as Ricky's voice in his head, not as loud as the dead girl's disgust and the memories of their shrieks. The metal in his head draws the lightning to him. He's the tallest thing on the plane, and he's magnetized. His watch is going nuts. His feelings hurt. His mouth is full of fire. Someone has got to be nearby. Ricky thinks his thoughts in the kid's dented skull. The kid searches strangers out. He looks for retirees, he scans for young lovers, fishermen, he watches for kids who've come out to drink beer on the beach in wild weather. His hands glow blue and white. His hands can do amazing things. The sand crabs stare up at him, curious, expectant. He sits and waits for the ocean or the sky to kill him. It would be a proper ending. He thinks he deserves that, at least. Ricky got a proper ending. The girl, in her way, received one. And so did the rest of them. He stands and walks along, the tide rising, the waves swelling, breaking against his knees, the foam exploding against the side of his face. Lightning continues to shear down, thunder like thrown sticks of dynamite. He moves around an outcropping of rock. He moves around fencing, up and down dunes, slipping past saw grass. Isolated beach houses come into view. The kid keeps going. He walks up to a gorgeous place, the kind of place he and the girl used to talk about buying one day, the kind of place that it's easy to talk about because everyone talks about places like this, and he knocks on the door with his burning fist. Ricky enjoys the isolation, the deep loneliness out here, in the storm, on the water, away from the hateful population. A girl very much like the girl, his dead girl, like all the dead girls, answers. Ricky's mouth waters. The kid's mouth waters. She says, "Can I help you?" The metal in his head clashes together and rings like the loudest church bell in 20 centuries. It's a familiar story. Next story. Dark Witness by Charlaine Harris and Rachel Kane. It seemed to Emma Saxon that she'd been driving forever when she saw the crosses. No, not the crosses. First, she saw the woman. "Mom," her daughter Laurel's voice was saying, in the blurry, distorted tempo of a slowed recording. "We'll be late if we don't hurry up." So Laurel must have been in the passenger seat, but Emma couldn't seem to turn her head that way. The road was black, the headlights showing nothing, yet somehow there was a woman kneeling down under a single streetlight. Her image was broken into stark blacks and whites by the harsh light. She was hammering crosses into the hard ground. 2 crosses, mere crooked boards, nailed together, painted white. Cheap tinsel streamers floated from them in an unseen, unfelt wind. Emma was pressing the gas but the van was slowing down, and to Emma's horror the woman turned to look at her. She had only a black hole for a face and a flash of pale, nauseatingly yellow eyes. The horrible woman inclined her head toward the crosses, and Emma had to look. The crosses read Emma and Laurel in crooked letters of blood that dripped down the chilly white of the crosses, and her daughter was saying, "Mom, we're going to be late." And then Emma turned her head, finally, away from the crosses and the light and the blood and the eyes, and he was sitting in the passenger seat, smiling at her with that sharply handsome face and those piss-yellow eyes, and she opened her mouth to scream and the scream turned into a shrill electronic shriek that went on and on and on. Emma opened her eyes and slapped at the snooze button on the alarm clock. She missed the first 2 times, got it the third. In the sudden, terribly thick silence she tried to get her breath, tried to blink the tears out of her eyes. The room felt very cold, and she turned on her side and wrapped the covers more tightly around her shaking body. Not again, I thought I was past this. She'd stopped having dreams about the bastard years ago. Why was she thinking about him now? What had she done to deserve that new trip into hell? The shower started up in the hall bathroom, and Emma groaned into her pillow. Laurel was already up. Although she was more than old enough to get up, fix her own breakfast, and be off to school, Emma had made it a rule to sit down with her daughter every morning, even if there was only time for a cup of coffee, for Emma, milk for Laurel, and a breakfast pastry apiece. Emma needed that touchstone of normal life. Get up, Emma told herself, but part of her didn't want to obey. The bed was warm and safe, and the world out there, that was cold, and uncertain, and, with the dream lingering in her head, terrifying. Get up for Laurel. You have to do it. That got her moving, though she felt frail and her skin was sensitive, as if she were recovering from a feverish illness. Everyday items seemed oddly juxtaposed, sinister, dangerous. Emma hesitated before thrusting her bare feet into her slippers, sure they hid scorpions or spiders, but when she stood she felt only the normal comfort of cotton-covered foam. She put on her bathrobe, brushed her hair, and was in the kitchen taking out the ingredients for scrambled eggs before Laurel came down the hall. Her daughter was 16, and with the birthday had come attitude, tons of it. She was wearing eyeliner today. Emma didn't protest. They'd had a fight about last week's experimentation with eyeshadow, which had been extremely overdone, so now she elected to pick the battle she was likely to win. The eyeliner looked good. It made Laurel's rich brown eyes seem larger and brought out the golden gleam in their depths. Gold, not yellow. It isn't yellow. Good morning, sweetheart, Emma said, her voice coming out in a croak. She cracked 4 eggs into a bowl while clearing her throat. Sleep well? Laurel grunted. Yes or no? It didn't much matter. She was at that awkward stage where she could, and would, mutter secretively to her friends for hours on her cell phone, but you couldn't get 3 words in a row from her if you were her mother. Even now, Laurel pushed her long, straight hair back over her shoulders in an absent gesture and bent over her phone, fingers flying as she texted. Emma had tried to make a no phone before breakfast rule, but that had been a battle she definitely couldn't win. She said, mildly, no phone at the kitchen table, Laurel, you know that. Laurel groaned dramatically, but she put the phone on the counter next to her backpack. She emphasized her instant boredom by drumming her fingers on the table, maintaining her silence. Fine. Let her work for it. Milk's in the fridge, Emma said. Where else would it be? Laurel asked, and rolled her eyes, but she got up and poured herself a glass. Without being prodded, she loaded the coffee maker and set it to brew, a hopeful sign of morning cooperation. Emma whisked eggs and loaded up the skillet. Made toast, and plated the food. The two of them sat down to eat in, mostly, companionable silence. Emma made 2 attempts to find out what Laurel planned to do over the weekend. Laurel's response was a shrug that could mean anything. Typical. Laurel gulped down her eggs, toast, and milk, hastily dumped her dishes in the sink, and grabbed her backpack and phone as if they were life preservers in a shark-filled ocean. She headed for the door. Forget something? Emma asked, standing. Laurel sighed, dramatically, of course, and came back to give her mom a quick kiss on the cheek. That's better. Have a good day, honey. And call me when you're on the way home. I can walk 3 blocks, Mom, I'm not 5. Just to be safe, okay? Emma said quietly. Okay. You know, you have to let me grow up. Sure. But not today. The put-upon look on Laurel's face was pricelessly funny, but Emma didn't laugh, at least, not until her daughter slammed the door and went jogging down the driveway to meet her friends for the walk to school. Next year, she'll be driving, she thought. Dear God. How am I going to survive that? But next year's problems were just a dark cloud on the horizon. Emma felt better now, stronger, more in control of her life as she washed the breakfast things. She showered briskly, dressed for work, and headed off to the office. As she drove, she thought of her 1 o'clock meeting, and the presentation she had to prepare before then. Of course, accounting wouldn't have any of the figures ready until an hour before. It was a relief to occupy her mind with the mundane. How could she have let the dream spook her so badly? Why had she even had such a nightmare? She had no idea what had brought it on until she stopped for a red light 4 blocks away from their house. Something fluttered at the edge of her vision. With dread, she turned her head to look. 2 white crosses had been pounded into the hard ground, just at the base of a streetlight. Cheap tinsel streamers tangled and bounced in the morning breeze. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She looked in the rearview mirror. Empty. Impulsively, Emma parked in the gas station lot on the corner. On unsteady legs, she walked over to take a look. The sun was still unbelievably fierce in late September, and the Dallas heat was unrelenting. Scorched grass crunched like tiny bones beneath her feet, and she felt the dream overlap into reality and bend it all out of shape, into the sharp angles of adrenaline and madness, until she saw the names. Jeremy. Audrey. And a faded picture stapled to the larger cross, Audrey's cross, that showed a middle-aged woman with a young boy next to her. There was no indication of what had happened. Weren't such crosses always erected for traffic accidents? She'd never stopped to look at one of these homemade roadside memorials before, and the faded picture brought home to her that the intersection she used every day was a place where someone else's dreams had died. Sorry, she said, and felt embarrassed when she heard her own voice. She hurried back to her van and started it up and felt the knot in her stomach slowly untie. The dream was just a dream. Not her name on the cross, and not Laurel's. It was just an ugly mash of truth and fiction, like all nightmares. Now she knew where it had come from. Nothing to worry about. Accounting didn't have the figures ready when she got there. Typical. By the time her presentation was over, she'd forgotten all about the dream. Laurel brought home friends for dinner. She texted first, though, which gave Emma time to evaluate the contents of her refrigerator. Luckily, there was enough steak and chicken to go around. When they arrived, all together, Emma knew 2 of the guests, Laurel's best friend, Amy, she of the curly red hair and pale blue eyes, and Elena, who was dark-haired and dark-eyed and spoke with a faint Spanish accent. Elena had become a friend more recently, but her manners were good and she had a sweet smile. This time, for the first time, Laurel had brought home a boy. He was good-looking, too, a little taller than Laurel, with shaggy blondish hair that kept falling in his eyes. He was tanned and fit and broad-shouldered. He didn't look up much, but when he did, Emma caught a glimpse of dark eyes. There was something familiar about him, maybe the cheekbones. Perhaps he'd gone to school with Laurel when they were much younger. Laurel said, "This is Tyler." She didn't say anything else about him, which was unusual. Normally, she'd have been babbling out the details. He's in my history class, he's on the tennis team, he wants to design video games. Tyler himself volunteered nothing. He seemed to be working hard at blending in with the furniture. He sat at the far end of the table, as far as he could get from Emma. "So, Tyler, how do you know the girls?" Emma asked, as she passed the potatoes around to Elena. The girls all exchanged quick looks that Emma couldn't read. And Tyler didn't raise his head. He was spooning gravy over his potatoes with great concentration. "I met Laurel at the library," he said. He spoke softly, and he definitely did not meet her eyes. "We both like biographies." That was almost suspiciously non-threatening, like something rehearsed. But she supposed it could be true. Laurel nudged the boy, and he said, "History, too." "I didn't know you liked history," Emma said to her daughter, her tone bright and conversational. I'm always trying to get you to read historical novels. Not novels, Mom. History. Real history. And myth and legend and all kinds of things. You're always trying to get me to read fiction. I don't like fiction. That was news, because there were shelves of well-read novels in Laurel's room. The Harry Potter series. Tons of paranormal books for teens. All kinds of things that Laurel and her friends had been white-hot passionate about for the past few years. Suddenly, that was over. What are you all reading now? Emma asked, and that got the conversation jump-started again, with the girls talking over each other excitedly. Amy was still on the fiction bandwagon. Apparently Elena was the driving force to move Laurel over to the non-fiction shelves. Tyler stayed quiet, eating his steak as if his life depended on it. He seemed shy and awkward. Despite her native caution, Emma's heart went out to the boy. This wasn't easy for him. Though he ventured a comment every now and then, the girls' conversation flowed over him like a river. At least he was trying. When dinner was over, Emma served cake and ice cream and put on a movie. She left them to have fun. A couple of hours later, Emma could hear their voices in the hall and registered that they were saying goodbye. She wasn't listening with much attention. Curled up in a chair in her office, she was engrossed in her own book. She didn't expect them to come thank her for the meal, though that would have been nice. She was surprised to hear a quiet knock on the open door. Slipping her bookmark in her place, she looked up to see Tyler standing there. For a split second, she saw a glint of yellow in his eyes. Something inside her cringed. She scolded herself severely. Her reading lamp had a lemon-yellow shade. She'd only seen its reflection. She forced a smile. I just wanted to say. He licked his lips and started again as he shifted uncomfortably, one foot to the other. The boy was very neatly dressed, Emma noticed. He surely hadn't gone to school dressed in a stiff khaki pants, checked shirt, and clean sneakers. I just wanted to say thanks. For having me in. Emma smiled more genuinely. How nice. But from his grave face, she could see he wasn't finished. Look, you're going to hate me, I know that, and I just wanted to say that, I'm doing this all wrong. He looked so wretched that Emma put her book aside and stood up, feeling sorry for him. It's okay, she said. Tyler, why in the world would I hate you? If you and Emma are going out together, no, he said, and looked up at her. Again, she caught that odd flare in his eyes, and she felt the answering sick kick in the pit of her stomach, but it was the lighting. Reflections. Tricks of memory. No, that's not it. Look, it's just that I wanted to meet you. I wanted to know why. Why? He looked down at his shoes and shook his head. Why you gave me up, he said. It was almost a whisper. Why you didn't care. Why you didn't want me. She sucked in her breath, and it made a sound as sharp as a scream. She stepped back, until the wall stopped her, and she felt cold, unaccountably heavy, as if she might sink straight through the floor. What are you talking about? Tyler met her gaze and held it. This time, she saw no glints of yellow, no reflections. Nothing but pain. I'm your son, he said. I'm the one you gave away. And then he turned and started to walk away. She cried out then, a sound that ripped itself out of her soul, and reached out to him, not to hold him, not to hug him, but to push him. Push him away. Far away. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. She heard him saying goodbye to Laurel and Amy and Elena, and she heard the other girls leave after him. But she sat in her chair, numbed, frozen, unable to think what to do or how to stop the destruction that was rushing at her, at her daughter, at this tight family unit she had built so carefully out of lies. It was all coming apart. Kill him, something in her said. Brutal and quiet and practical. Kill him before worse happens. But she couldn't do it when he'd been born, and she couldn't do it now, not after having seen his pain. Maybe I was wrong, she thought. It was a frantic thought, a child's desperate plea for mercy. Maybe he's not like his father. But he was. She knew he was. Because if he wasn't, what did that make her? What awful, terrible monster did that make her? The next day passed in a nightmarish fugue. She didn't know how to find the boy. How to contact him. She couldn't ask Laurel. Her daughter would know something was wrong. But when Laurel was late coming home, she couldn't stand to wait any longer. She started to call, but no, her voice would betray her. Texting was safer. Where are you? Who are you with? She imagined Laurel telling her phone, none of your business, but the text back was more polite. Just Amy and some other PPL. All okay. Emma couldn't ask the deadly question, are you with Tyler? She just couldn't. So she compromised. Where are you? Mall. Emma could almost hear the where else would we be. At the end of that, and see the eye roll. Home soon. He'd met her at the library. Maybe she wouldn't have invited him shopping. Maybe it might all go away, now that he'd been here, seen Emma, said what he had come to say. Maybe it was over. Emma tried to pretend it was, desperately. She made dinner, Laurel's favorite, beef stroganoff. She rehearsed answers to questions in her mind. I don't know what he's talking about. Honey, you can't believe what strangers tell you. She was stirring in the noodles when she heard Laurel's keys in the door. Without turning, she said, Hey, honey, thanks for being on time. Which, of course, Laurel wasn't. Sarcasm was a nervous defense against the fear churning inside her. Because she didn't turn, she missed whatever nonverbal cues Laurel might have been giving her, but she couldn't miss the tone in her daughter's voice. The hard, flat, angry tone. Why didn't you tell me? Laurel asked. Emma put down the spoon and turned to look at her, and with one glance she knew that it was all going to fall apart. There was no rehearsal for this. No possible response that made any sense at all. Why didn't you tell me I had a brother? Laurel said, and the sick feeling in Emma's stomach turned black and toxic, and she sank down in a chair at the kitchen table, staring blindly at her hands. On the stove, the stroganoff bubbled and hissed, and she ought to be stirring it, but she didn't care. Let it burn. Mom. Mom. Answer me. That last rose to a shout, almost to a scream, and Emma raised her gaze to fix on her daughters. The golden flecks in those eyes. The fury in her face. The betrayal. For 16 years, she'd kept secrets, and now they were out. But she tried anyway. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma said. Her lips felt numbed, as if someone had hit her. Honey, Tyler. I'm talking about Tyler. Laurel spat. He has all the papers, all the proof that we're twins. Twins. And you gave him up. Why did you give him up? How could you? Didn't you love him? Do you even love me? My God, what are you? It was all black with pain, all of this, and she hated hearing it in Laurel's voice, knowing that her daughter was infected with this horror too. She tried to shield her. Tried her very best to make it go away. But like the dream, it came back. Emma took in a deep breath, closed her eyes, and said, I had to give him up. I couldn't keep him. Why? It was a wail, and she heard the tears in her daughter's voice. Against the black velvet backdrop of her closed lids, Emma saw a flash of yellow eyes. "Because I would have hurt him," she said. "It was the only way I could save him, Laurel. I kept you because I could. But he was," she couldn't explain this, not in a way that her daughter would ever understand. "He was what?" "He was just a baby." That last rose to a scream of raw fury and hurt, and then it was too late. Laurel was gone, the door slammed loudly enough to rattle glass, and Emma opened her eyes and wiped away tears and realized, with a jolt of horror, that her daughter was running away from her. Into the dark. Toward an evil she knew nothing whatsoever about. Still, she tried. She ran out the front door just in time to watch her daughter slam the passenger door of a sedan, catching a glimpse of Tyler behind the wheel as it sped away. "He's too young to drive," she thought ridiculously, conventionally, knowing that was the least of her problems. She wheeled back into the house and flew into action. Emma had sense enough to take dinner off the stove and dump it aside, and sense enough to open up the gun safe and take out the two things she'd sworn she would never need again, the silver-coated knife and the revolver filled with custom-cast silver bullets. The other thing in the gun safe was a manila file folder. Emma hesitated, then grabbed it. The file. The whole story. Gruesomely illustrated. She didn't know if it would do any good at all, but she took it anyway. She changed into dark pants, dark shirt, black jacket, like an assassin, she told herself. In case sneaking was necessary. And then she went out, not after her daughter, but after her son. Finding Laurel wasn't that hard, though Emma had always tried very hard to be a normal soccer mom. She'd never been able to shake the habits she'd acquired when her life was ripped to shreds. For years, she'd lived in a state of caution. Of paranoia, of fear so pervasive it was existential. So while she let Laurel have leeway, she kept a tether on her. The cell phone had a tracking feature, and if there was one thing Laurel would never, ever discard, it was her cell. Tyler was definitely moving quickly. The signal that Emma locked in was on the freeway. Emma mounted her own cell phone into the console of her van, put the revolver under the seat where she could easily grab it, and set off in pursuit. She kept the speed reasonable until she was safely on the interstate. It was late enough that the traffic was lighter, and speeding cars were nothing new around here anyway. She weaved in and out of traffic, following the blinking light of her daughter's mortal danger as it sped west, and she felt absolutely sure that her life, the life she'd constructed, was over. "I'll take him with me," she thought. "One way or another, this stops here." She was gaining on the signal by the time they'd hit the outer borders of Fort Worth, out into what was officially the countryside, and that was dangerous, because the cell coverage would get spotty the farther out from population centers they ran. That might be the intent, she realized. She needed to catch them before the signal disappeared. She floored it, blowing past slow-moving trucks and sedans and semi-tractor trailers, some whose drivers blew their horns in warning. She didn't heed them, didn't care about the consequences of what she was doing. She'd been waiting for this, she realized. Whether she'd been able to acknowledge it consciously or not, she'd been waiting for this to happen every moment since Laurel's birth. There was a kind of freedom in knowing it was finally here. She caught up to the signal. It was a truck. A cattle truck, rattling along in the night, full of scared and shifting cows on their way to the end of their lives. She could imagine Tyler, smirking, coming alongside the cattle truck, taking Laurel's cell, tossing it into the stinking hauler. Easy enough to do, especially if it was stopped at a light. His idea of a joke. That made sense, because his father would have found it hilarious. The realization hit her like a bullet. My daughter could be anywhere. Emma pulled over to the shoulder in a spray of gravel, her tires skidded, and she almost went over the steep shoulder, but she didn't care. She couldn't get her breath, and her heart was pounding so hard and fast it filled her ears with a furious drumming. A desperate silent scream was locked inside her vocal cords. And then she heard the cheerful sound of her cell phone's ringtone. She put the van in park, shook her trembling hands to get feeling back into her fingers, that was how hard she'd been gripping the steering wheel, and then yanked the cell phone off the console. The screen read private caller. No number visible. She didn't say hello. She didn't need to. Don't you just love modern technology? The voice from her nightmare said. I fucking love it. Makes everything so easy. Just reach out and touch somebody. Her phone made a little chirping sound. She had a text message. She opened it and saw a smiling photo of Laurel, taken with a flash. Laurel, inside Tyler's car. You know who this is, don't you, Emma? She couldn't answer, didn't want to answer, the way a child puts the covers over her head to hide from the monster in the bedroom. She could feel his attention fully on her, like the scorching heat of the sun in the desert. Do you want her back? She swallowed painfully, licked her lips, and said, yes. It took everything out of her, but she did it. He laughed. She reached down under the seat and took hold of the gun. She put it in the seat next to her, as if its mere presence could protect her from that laughter. But nothing stopped the sound from crawling inside her, touching her, taking her. That confident, utterly callous laugh, it told her he was certain he could repossess her. You've been watching us, she said. It came out more like a whisper than she wanted. All these years. Nope. No point in wasting my time. You're predictable, he said. One of your best qualities. Tyler's taken a liking to little Laurel, and good for him. A brother ought to care for his sister. He's bringing her to me for a proper introduction. If you want to be here for it, you'd better get back on the road. Where? The fear had drained out of her, as if she just couldn't contain it anymore. It was too big, too vast. It had ruptured the skin of her and bled out, leaving her empty. He gave her an address in Rockwall, at least an hour's drive east across the Metroplex. Emma. She'd thought that she couldn't be afraid anymore, but the sound of her name in his mouth made her shudder. You be careful on the roads, now. Wouldn't want you to miss this. She didn't wait for him to hang up. She put the phone back into its holder on the console, put the van in drive, and sped away, sliding into traffic just ahead of a Mustang. The young man in the passenger seat flipped her off as the small car whipped around her. She didn't care. She took the next exit, U-turned, and floored the gas, headed back the opposite direction. He'll wait, she thought. He'll want me to see. He'll want me to know. She had to pray that was true. There was something eerily unsurprising in the utter middle-class normality of the subdivision. The brick wall at the entrance bore the word Serene Shores. To justify the shores, there was a large pond right inside. It was probably charming in the daytime. Now, there were only the indistinct pale shapes of ducks dotting the bank and dark smooth water, and the trees looked frozen and twisted. She drove around the pond and then turned right. The streetlights lit up the front of a McMansion, built on the same pseudo-grandiose lines as its neighbors looming only a couple of feet away, maximum houses on minimum lots. There was something vile about this ultimate horror hiding here, in this neat, pretentious suburban neighborhood. She pulled up to the closed garage door. Tyler must have put his car inside. She prayed Laurel was in the house. Emma shut the engine off, dropping the keys and her cell phone into one pocket of her leather jacket and jamming the revolver into the other. She picked up her purse with the file stuffed inside, took a deep breath, and opened the van door. The front door was flanked by two Chinese temple dogs, staring off into the distance. There were leaves and spiderwebs and a wrinkled flyer for a tree trimming service jammed in behind the one on her right. As she looked down, half crazy with fear, she suddenly had a premonition, a strong one. She'd learned not to ignore those. If she'd listened to the first one she'd ever had, "I really need to catch a ride home from school today, not walk home," she wouldn't be in this fix now. So she took the gun from her pocket and put it down in the shadow between the temple dog statue and the brick wall. Then she rang the bell. A cheery little three-note chime sounded from within, and only a second or two went by before the door swung open. Tyler was standing there. He didn't say a word. He took a step back, avoiding her gaze. That was smart. If her stare were able to kill, he'd be writhing on the floor. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. She clenched her teeth and walked on. The entry hall had striped wallpaper. The house smelled like lemon furniture polish and vanilla, air freshener, not the warm scent of things baking. The art was of the Thomas Kincaid School, cozy cottages bathed in sunshine. "Sorry about this," Tyler said, his face turned away. "I really am." She didn't speak. She couldn't. There must be something of her in him, but he was his father's puppet. She followed him down the hallway, past darkened doorways, to a brightly lit living room. The monster's lair. The lair gave a good imitation of a homey den. The monster and her daughter were sitting on the sofa, having some flowery-smelling variety of hot tea. There was a muted TV program playing on the widescreen television set. Tyler's influence could be seen in the room: gaming equipment, wireless controllers dumped on the coffee tables, empty soft drink cans on the pass-through bar to the kitchen. Everything about the room was normal, and at the same time completely fake, as if the monster had ordered a room of furniture from some store ad and positioned the pieces exactly as they'd been in the photograph. There was one personal touch: a single photograph, framed and centered under a spotlight on the wall, a posed image of her and Laurel, done years ago for a Christmas card. How did he get that? She couldn't think about it, couldn't worry about that now. She said, calmly and firmly, "Laurel, please come here." Laurel's father looked up at her and smiled. He wore the same skin she remembered. It sent a seismic shock through her like the house. He was bland, nondescript, brown hair, dusted now with silver, and brown eyes. His skin tone was medium, too. A dozen witnesses would have given him a dozen different nationalities, depending on their preconceptions. He couldn't be picked out of a crowd, and that was the point. The entire point. "Emma," he said. He sounded pleased. "Have a seat, we were just talking about you." "Laurel, please come here." Laurel took a sip of her tea and settled in deeper on the couch. "I'm fine, Mom." Emma couldn't read her voice, and Laurel was looking at the creature in the man's suit. Was she really oblivious to the danger? Emma wanted nothing more than to launch herself across the coffee table, grab her daughter, and get out of that room, but she knew that was what he was waiting for. She focused on him. If she'd brought the gun inside, she would have tried to kill him now, but she realized that wouldn't have worked. He was expecting instant, unreasoning violence. So she said, "What name are you using these days?" His eyebrows raised. As if he was very mildly surprised. "The same one I've always used, M. Charles Wilson." "I noticed you changed your name, though." "Laurel, did you know your mom used to have the last name Kaczynski?" "What?" Laurel blinked, and her bright, accusing eyes focused on Emma for the first time. "How much more haven't you told me?" "God, Mom. My real name is Kaczynski." "Your legal name is Saxon," Emma said. "Everything he tells you is a lie, Laurel." "Believe me." "Why should I?" her daughter shot back. "You've lied to me my whole life." "What about Tyler? Even if you couldn't keep him, why didn't you tell me I had a brother somewhere out there?" And you told me my dad was dead. I hoped he was, Emma thought. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw Charles. This was the first time she'd ever known what he called himself, put an affectionate hand on her daughter's shoulder. Don't be too hard on your mom, kid, he said. He patted gently. He left his hand there. Every nerve in Emma's body screamed at her to do something. Your mom went through a very hard time, he told Laurel. Look, I was no prize, I admit, I left before you two were born. Your mom went into a tailspin, and she had to be treated for depression. She gave your brother up for adoption because she was so angry at me. I'm just happy that I came back to my senses after that. I was able to get him back. But you didn't look for us? For me? Laurel looked up at him, and for the first time, she frowned a little. Why not? Well, I did talk to your mom. But she told me she didn't want me to be part of your lives. Then she moved away and changed her name. It took me a long time to track you guys down again, and once I did, I wasn't sure I ought to contact you. It was Tyler who made that decision. Right, son? Tyler, leaning against the wall, nodded. Could he really have grown up in this house, with this thing? He was staring down at his feet, looking remote and almost disinterested, but that was a mask, Emma thought. He was scared. Almost as scared as she was. Laurel, Emma said. She reached into her purse, and Charles's stare came to fix on hers. She saw the pulse of yellow fire in his gaze, but she was ready for it this time. Although it terrified her, she didn't let it stop her. She took out the file and handed it over to her daughter. He's lying to you. This is the truth. Laurel opened the folder and gasped. She clapped a hand over her mouth as she stared at the first photo of her mother's battered, misshapen face. She turned it over. The next one was of the damage to Emma's torso. Laurel gave a high-pitched noise of denial. When those pictures had been taken, Emma had been hardly older than Laurel was now. Charles smiled. He didn't look away from Emma's face. Laurel turned the pages with a trembling hand and looked up with horror in her eyes. Finally, something had gotten through. Mom. The word was soft, almost muffled, and Laurel closed the folder and tried to get up to come to her. Charles's hand on her shoulder held her back. That wasn't me, sweetheart, he said, not even making an effort to sound concerned. I was her boyfriend when that happened. She was already pregnant by me when she was raped. I freaked out, wasn't my finest hour, Laurel, I know that. But I came back. I came back. Mom. Emma held her hand out. Laurel slipped out from beneath Charles's hand and went to her, and as Emma put her arm around her, she felt a surge of strength. He's lying, she said flatly. He attacked me on my way home from school when I was 17. I never knew his name, but I knew what he was. And what am I? Charles asked, and tilted his head to one side. Go on, Emma, tell our daughter what you think I am. Let her know just how insane her mother really is. When Emma didn't take the bait, he sighed. Laurel, your mom is sick. I'm sorry, I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but she thinks I'm some kind of demon, and you and Tyler, she thinks you're both some kind of demons, too. Not Laurel, Emma said. Just the boy. It's always the boy, isn't it? You're insane, Charles said. Laurel, do you hear what she's saying? How crazy that is. Is it? Emma backed up, toward the doorway. Charles, sitting calmly on the sofa, didn't move. He watched, still toying with her, still smiling that unsettling little smile. Is it really? I'm not letting you have my daughter, you bastard. No way in hell. Hell, he repeated, and he moved his gaze from her to Tyler, who was between them and the hallway. Funny you should say that, because I've got nothing to do with hell. That's a concept that came long after me. I'm not the devil, you know. I'm just, well. They call me a witness. Laurel took in a sharp, trembling breath, and Emma knew just what was happening. The ground was moving under her world. She'd thought it was all malls and boys and simple, though sometimes brutal things, but maybe her mom was crazy, and maybe her dad was, too. Her rapist dad. Maybe it was something worse. Maybe neither one of them was crazy. Witness to what? Emma asked. Witness to the end, he said. I'm here to see it. See what? Everything, he said. I must watch the human race forever. I have to look like one of them to do this. But bodies wear out, and I have to make new ones. Only the most special women will do, Emma. Like you. Like our daughter. He laughed, then shook his head. I know it sounds sick. It's just the way things work for witnesses. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. He'd said that. She remembered it as clearly as she did the feeling of the blood running down her cheeks, of her broken teeth grinding in her mouth. As she remembered the cruel, relentless weight of him on her, and the taste of her own desperate, muffled screams. She remembered that phrase, the dispassionate way he'd said it then. He'd made it almost a chant. Nothing personal, relax, nothing personal. The memory made her lose control. She still had the knife, and instead of doing what she should have done, lunging for Tyler with it, forcing him out of the way, she went for Charles. For the source of the evil, not its issue. She dove over the coffee table and right into him as he sat on the couch. And he didn't even try to stop her. She sank the blade deep in his guts and pulled up, muscles straining and twitching with the pulse of adrenaline, and something inside her that had been bottled up screamed and jumped and capered with delight. He was smiling. He was still smiling. She had to make him stop smiling. Then it was too late to think about what she was doing. There was blood gouting all over her, and he was falling sideways, so much red gushing out of him, all over her, and his eyes rolled back in his head, but not before she saw that last guttering flash of poisoned yellow in them. He never stopped smiling. Over the roaring in her head, Laurel was screaming. I killed him, Emma thought as she staggered to her feet. It felt good, but it also felt strangely distant. I killed the bastard, finally. He'll never touch me again. It tasted like victory, but felt like a loss. It occurred to her, slowly, that she'd just killed her daughter's father in a particularly gruesome way, right in front of her. But when she turned toward Laurel, she realized that Laurel was screaming for an entirely different reason. Tyler had moved away from the wall. He was in front of his sister, staring at her, and his eyes were flickering, igniting into a bright, hot, poisonous yellow. Her son said, grinning, "Thanks, Mom. Knew I could count on you to do the hard part." Her instinct was to rush blindly at him, to wrest Laurel away, but she knew better. That was what he was waiting for. Instead, Emma backed away, to the still-twitching corpse of the dead man, and pulled the knife free of his body. Tyler's grin dialed down from glee to business. He lunged forward to seize Laurel's wrist even as she tried to run. He pulled her into a tightly enveloping embrace. You really should go, Mom. I don't think you're going to want to see what comes next, do you? You've kind of already been there. Wouldn't want you to get flashbacks and crack up again. Hey, sis, did you know that dear old Mom spent 6 months before we were born scratching padded walls and mumbling to herself? And then spent another year after she gave me up getting high. Dear old Mom, the crackhead. They didn't even let her hold you until you were nearly 2, after she detoxed. Stop, Emma said. She'd never, ever told her daughter about those dark, awful days, she tried to forget they ever existed. She took in a deep breath and took a step toward him. Her grip was too tense on the knife, and she deliberately relaxed. "Tyler, you're as much a victim as I was. You never asked for any of this, and now." "Sorry, were you talking to someone?" "Because I know you weren't talking to little Tyler, that squirming bundle of joy you almost killed when they tried to put him in your arms. If you'd had your way, little Tyler would have had his baby neck broken before he took his first breath. Right?" "Yes," she said. She'd lied to Laurel for so long, but it was time for truth now, hard and scalding truth. "I knew what you were, even then." "You knew because I told you," the thing inside Tyler said, and arched one of her son's eyebrows. "I told you everything, just like I've told each of them, for thousands of years. But nobody remembers, because if they did, they'd go mad, or worse, they'd go sane. You came the closest, I have to admit. You almost knew." "Let her go," Emma said. "Let my daughter go. Take me instead." "Nice try. But like I said, I'm a witness. I see everything. I am the many-eyed, the recorder, the all-seeing. So I know that right after you got clean and sober, the first thing you did was get yourself fixed, like a stray dog. Too bad, I'd have taken you up on it, just to see the look on your face. But not to worry. Your genetic heritage lives on. In this lovely young lady. Time to start the next incubation cycle." "You can't do that," Emma said. "She's your sister. Do you think I care about stupid human genetics? I'm eternal, sweetheart, and she's just a temporary measure to keep me here in flesh. I'll find someone else for the next go-round." He shrugged. "Compatible women are always drawn near me. They can't help it. It's part of the gravitational structure of the universe." And as if his words had unlocked some secret closet in her mind, she knew. She saw. She remembered the vision he'd shoved into her mind as he was planting his seed inside her, a vision of a universe so complex, so vast, so cold that it had driven her mad. And always, the witnesses. Part of the world, waiting, with the keys to open the way to something she could only, incoherently, call the apocalypse, because the vision of that bloody vista of death and despair couldn't be looked on directly. To a witness, she and Laurel were nothing, nothing at all, but vessels to ensure his perpetuity, broken bottles left empty on the road in the wake of his speeding car. She also knew something else, something glimpsed in one blinding second, the one thing he'd given her that he didn't want her to know. He could be stopped. Not with the silver knife, he'd let her kill his old shell as a sign of his arrogance. He'd done it for his own convenience. If she buried that knife in Tyler's chest, he'd laugh, spit blood in her face, and cut her to pieces with the same bloody blade. That spark of hope steadied her in a way that all the fear in the world couldn't. "If that's true, there's another compatible girl close by," Emma said. "Let me find her. Let me bring her here. And then you can let my daughter go." That surprised him. Finally. She saw him stop and consider her, frowning just a little. "You do that? Bring another woman here, knowing what I'll do to her?" "I'll do anything to save my daughter," she said, and she meant it. "I swear to you, on my soul, I will keep my word. But you have to swear you won't rape Laurel, seduce her, or harm her in any way while I'm gone. Swear it on your name." A flicker of yellow danced in his eyes, and he smiled a little wider. "You have done your homework. All right. On my name, I swear that I will not rape, seduce, or harm your daughter while you are gone." She felt a little shiver through her bones, a kind of power rippling in the room. "Mom," Laurel whispered, shuddering. Tears gathered in her eyes. "Mom, you can't leave me. You can't. I'm sorry, sweetie, she said. But he won't hurt you. He swore on his name. Try to stay calm. I'll be back soon. Emma took in a deep breath, turned to Tyler. Tell me how to identify her. The piss-yellow glare in her son's eyes flared almost red and then subsided almost to nothing until she could see her human son beneath it. Or the shell that was left of him. Though this broke her heart, it forged it into steel at the same time. You'll know her when you see her, he said. They've got a glow. Look at Laurel. Really look. She turned her gaze on her daughter, and she saw it. Maybe she'd always seen it, in some way, but now she recognized it consciously. An aura of gauzy light drifting behind her like mist. Like wings. Like angel wings. Blood of angels, the witness whispered almost in her ear, and she shuddered. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. You carry that, Emma, you and Laurel. That's what makes you perfect. She fought to keep her voice from shaking. Get away from me. He took a long step back, and his voice rose to a normal level. If you go look, you'll find her. She'll be close. You won't have to go too far. Mom, Laurel pleaded. I have to do it, she said to her daughter. She knew that if she looked in the mirror now, she'd see the same gauzy light behind her own body, but mutilated, dirty, broken. She couldn't allow that to happen to her own child. No matter the cost. Laurel was still calling her name when Emma walked out the door, retrieved the gun from the place she'd concealed it, and got into the car to search for their salvation. Emma spotted the girl less than 2 blocks away. It was easy. She was the only pedestrian in the quiet neighborhood. She was striding confidently down the dark sidewalk, a tall blonde girl, maybe a few years older than Laurel. Under the streetlight, she looked tan. There was a backpack slung over her shoulder. She was wearing a red hoodie with a community college logo on the breast. A girl with her whole life ahead of her. And those ghostly angel wings whispering through the air behind her. Emma pulled the car to the curb, rolled down the window, and leaned over to wave at the girl. The girl hesitated, looking around, nighttime, stranger, but then she bent over to look into the car. She didn't come closer, which was smart, but that didn't matter, because as soon as the girl's eyes were level with hers, Emma brought up the pistol. And pointed it right at her. The girl froze. What's your name? Emma asked her. The girl, terrified, suddenly looking like a child instead of a woman, just stared back at her with blank, shiny eyes. What's your name? Jenna, she finally whispered. Please don't, Jenna, shut up now and listen. This won't make any sense to you, but to save your own life, you better believe me. I want you to turn around and run back to campus. Then I want you to find another school on the other side of the world and go there. Get the hell out of here. Don't come back. Wherever it is you would naturally go. Now do the opposite. Save yourself. The girl licked her pale lips. Okay, sure, I'll go. Tonight. I mean it. I'll be checking, Jenna. You get the hell out of town on the first plane you can find. Act like a psycho killer is after you, because he is. Understand? Yes, Jenna faltered. She clearly believed she was talking to the psycho killer. Emma felt her attempt had only frightened the girl senseless. But she sighted the pistol on Jenna's chest anyway. The girl gasped. Tell me again what you're going to do. Transfer. Get out of town, Jenna said. I will, I swear. Please, I'm not going to hurt you, Emma said. But I'm not the one you should be afraid of. If you ever see a man with yellow eyes, don't hesitate. Run. Then she put the gun back on the seat, put the car in drive, and sped away, leaving Jenna bewildered and shaking on the sidewalk. In the rearview, she saw the girl start to run the opposite direction from the way she'd been going. She'd done the best she could do. She had no doubt that Jenna would be dialing 911 before she reached the end of the block, so she'd have very little time before the cops would be cruising Rockwall, looking for her van. Emma shook the bullets one-handed out of the revolver, then drove to the pond at the subdivision entrance. She got out and pitched the revolver as far as she could into the murky water, exciting some mallards, and then got back into her van and used her cell phone's browser to find the nearest church. It happened to be a Methodist church, but the denomination didn't matter to her. She was compelled to be in a sacred space. She'd avoided churches most of her life, for her own reasons. She'd always felt presence in them, and it had frightened her. Now, it didn't. She knew, because of what she'd glimpsed in the witness's mind, that the church was where she should be. There was safety there, but it was more than that. There was power. She just had to find it. It was Laurel's only hope. No cars in the Methodist parking lot. The side door had an office hours sign in the window, but of course it was night. Emma expected the door to be locked, but when she tried it, the handle turned. She had the sense, strange but very real, that she was expected. She made her way through the dark halls to the sanctuary, and she went inside. It was a neat, clean place, straight lines of pews with red velvet cushions and burgundy carpet. The arched windows were patterned stained glass, now black with night, and the whole place had a hushed, silent feeling to it. There was an area for the choir behind the pulpit, and a simple wooden cross hanging above the altar. No adornments. She felt a sudden surge of electricity go through the air, and the bulbs in the fixtures overhead flared on, brightened to an almost unbearable intensity, then went out. The church was left bathed in moonlight, and the feeling of energy racing through it lifted the hairs on her arms. She saw the thin blue crackles of it between her fingers. And then a voice whispered in her ear, "I've been waiting for you." She spun, and saw something that her brain refused to process, a raw spiraling tangle of light, bright as the heart of a star. She fell to her knees not out of piety, but out of awe. Even with her eyes tightly closed she could see it hovering before her. "Do you know who I am?" the voice whispered. It didn't seem to come from the light, it seemed to be on her shoulder, always on her shoulder. "Uriel," she said. She didn't know why she said it, but the name floated up from her, and she knew it was right. "You're Uriel. It is my honor to deliver to you your destiny," that whisper said. "Emma, child of angels, you have been chosen. Rise, and receive that which you seek." She couldn't have refused even if she'd wished, there was so much strength and inevitability to what the angel Uriel was whispering. She stood, not even aware of the effort, of the muscles working, because the light that was blooming inside her was so warm, so sweet, so perfect that she felt utterly at peace. And then the pain took hold. She felt her life burning away, the dross of it disappearing in an excruciating blaze of power. The darkness was coming, close enough to touch. "Peace," Uriel's whisper said, and she caught her breath and felt tears break free to steam away from her cheeks. "I give you the kiss of peace. Your destiny is upon you, Emma." She let out that held breath slowly, and as it trembled in the air, the beautiful, terrifying thing that had faced her was gone. Just gone. Not a fading, not a slow withdrawal. Uriel was gone as thoroughly as if he'd stepped through a door and slammed it behind him. The only evidence that he'd been there was steam rising from the carpet like morning mist and the burned-out bulbs in the ceiling lights. Emma looked down at herself. She looked the same, though steam rose from her clothes, too. And even from her skin. The pain was gone, and so was the feeling of power. But she knew that she was different. She smiled and turned toward the altar, and said, softly, thank you. Nothing. But she hadn't expected anything this time. She went in without knocking and found Tyler standing behind Laurel, holding her as a human shield. He'd expected Emma to come in shooting, she realized. She might have done that if she hadn't understood it wouldn't accomplish anything. But she didn't need to. She knew that now. Where is she? Tyler asked. The girl? Emma said, outside. But I'm not bringing her in until you give me my daughter. Tyler was smart, and he was powerful, and he was immortal, but he was not omniscient. He studied Emma, and he saw nothing except what she wanted him to see, the same tattered, ragged light trailing behind her like broken wings. The same beaten, degraded look in her eyes. You're a weak little bitch, aren't you? Humans. No wonder the apocalypse is coming for you. You deserve it. He thrust Laurel at her. Emma held her daughter in her arms for one long, precious second, feeling the strength of desperation in Laurel's embrace, and then whispered, you have to go now, baby. Get in the car and drive away. Not without you, Laurel whispered back. Mom, please. Emma kissed her temple, just a bare brush of her lips, and felt her child go still and quiet. Hush, she breathed. Now go, baby. I love you. That kiss had given Laurel more than words, it had given her knowledge. All the knowledge that Emma now possessed, of the witnesses, of the angels, of what was past and what was to come. Not omniscience, but some portion of wisdom. And that gave Laurel the strength to push back from Emma, look straight into her eyes, and for the first time in their relationship, Laurel saw her. Saw her for the girl she'd been, the broken thing she'd become, the woman she tried to be for her child. Saw her for the bright burning thing she was now. I love you, Mom, she said. Thank you. And then she took the keys from Emma's hand and walked out the door with no hesitation. Emma didn't turn to watch her go. She heard the car start, the tires hiss, and the engine roar as Laurel drove away. Silence fell. Tyler was still smiling. It looked less like a human expression now than a hole into darkness. Well, he said. You owe me a girl. So let's have it. You don't think I really brought one, do you? She asked. Come on, Tyler. I wouldn't give you an innocent victim, and you know it. He shrugged. Well, it was worth a shot. Sorry, Mom, but your usefulness is pretty much over now. You got any weapons you want to try? Knife? Gun? Ballistic missile? Break it out and let's get it over with. I'm impatient. I want to start tracking Laurel, and your pain's getting boring. Is it? She stepped forward, empty-handed, eyes locked on his shining yellow ones. Is it really? Are you sure? What are you doing? You're my son, she said. Tyler, you're my son. Maybe I didn't want you. Maybe I should have killed you. But I didn't. You're here. Whatever else you are, I still love you for being my son. He frowned slightly and took a step back. I'm not your son. I'm wearing your son, bitch. A slight difference. She kept moving toward him, moving slowly, quietly, and Tyler finally took another step backward. She saw him recognize it, that energy crackling in the air. A light bulb popped in a lamp. Another one, with the sound of a gunshot crack. The stereo, playing softly in the corner, let out a distorted squall and a puff of smoke. But Emma moved closer. His next step put his heel into the blood of the body of his father, his last host. He had nowhere to go now. Emma stepped forward, her chest almost against his. As he froze in confusion, she kissed him. The kiss of peace. Time stopped, and universes paused in their spinning. Heaven and hell took in breaths. And then the witness was cast out, screaming, into the abyss that was neither heaven nor hell, life nor death, but eternal darkness. She felt him being unmade in the merciless emptiness, ripped apart. Lost forever, all his schemes, all his ambition, all his destiny, gone. All his evil, cut off at the root. And it hurt. God, she was so glad it hurt. Her son collapsed in her arms, and his heart beat on in faltering thuds once, twice, 3 times. For an instant, his dark eyes focused on hers, and she saw the gratitude there. The love. The peace. She had given him. "I'm so sorry," she said. "For everything. Go to God, Tyler." He did. Without pain. She lowered him back to the carpet, closed his eyes, and folded his hands neatly on his chest. What the coroner would make of this, Emma couldn't guess. Death by heart attack or stroke, maybe. Or some kind of family death pact. It no longer mattered to her. Human bodies were as fragile as light bulbs, and as prone to shattering. The power that Uriel had poured into her, the power that had opened a window to darkness and unmade a demon, was gone now, poured out like starlight into that void, and it had burned away everything else inside her. She was a dying bulb, and she felt the last flickers of light course through her veins. It felt sweet now, life. Sweet and clean and restored to the clarity it had possessed when she was a girl, full of promise and possibility. Emma walked out into the dark and stood there for a moment, soaking in the late September warmth. All around her, as if it was broad daylight, the night-soaked grass flared green, the flowers shouted colors, and the world spoke. She raised her face to the sky and laughed in delight. And then she was gone. Jenna Searles walked down a gray street in Portland. In the late fall chill, she wore layers of protection against the relentless drizzle. Despite the cold and rain, she had to admit she liked it here. Tall evergreens, mountains, coffee shops on every corner. And Portland liked her. She had friends who had come to her as if she'd always been meant to be here. From time to time, she thought about the woman in the van, that desperate, crazy woman. As she'd been packing in the early morning, the cops had come to her parents' house to tell Jenna that they'd found her. The news reports had given Jenna the full story: the murdered dad, the dead son, the woman collapsed from a massive stroke on the front lawn. They'd never found the gun. But they'd found a fascinating file. The details were never in the papers. For no good reason, Jenna had chosen to take the dead woman's advice. To her parents' consternation, she'd packed up and left for Oregon, which was as opposite to Texas as she could get. She liked the University of Portland and its funky students. She liked her new friends and her cool apartment. It felt like destiny, somehow. She stopped to get a cup of hot chocolate and sipped it as she hiked up the hill toward the university grounds. Cars whizzed by, stirring fallen leaves. There was a sharp smell of burning wood in the air. People were starting to put out Christmas lights. She paused at the light to wait for the safe crossing, and a soft jingling of bells drew her attention a few yards down the side of the street, off her route. Normally, she wouldn't have glanced that way. That was how she came to see the crosses. There were 3 of them clustered together, crude white painted wood, black paint, faded silk flowers jammed in at the base. The jingling came from frayed ribbons with bells tied at the ends, tossed in the wind. She could see the names from where she stood. Emma. Tyler. The 3rd cross was blank. Jenna shivered, as if someone had just walked over her grave, and then the light changed, and she kept walking, and put it out of her mind.